Hello, welcome to Logicwaves Academy. My name is Mayur Patil, and today I would like to demonstrate you some of the fabulous features of Angular 14, which released a couple of weeks ago. And this is going to be a multi-part series of sessions which are going to demonstrate multiple features of Angular 14. Some of the features which today in this video we are going to conduct is the very first important thing is how to upgrade the CLI version of your existing Angular to the latest one, that is 14.x, although it is still in the developer preview. That means it is not yet recommended for production usage, but apparently in upcoming days, in upcoming weeks or months, we will see the production version, the full developer productions version of Angular. But right now it is just into a preview version. That means it just gives us the pathway of what kind of changes we are expecting in a final version of Angular 14 in upcoming weeks or possibly in a month. But right now, these are the features, these are the fabulous features modifications we have received as a developer version a few weeks back. The very first one is how to upgrade to the CLI. The second one and the most talked topic of Angular 14 is a standalone component, which actually put Angular's module.ts file absolute, completely removed, and you without any module file, without any creation of a modules, I'm going to demonstrate how to create a standalone modules and how to integrate those modules with routes, because that also leads us to the providers topic. So provider routes and a standalone component are the three primary topics. Along with that, a small demonstration of Angular material design and how to integrate those modules into standalone component based project. That is exactly what we are going to demonstrate. Now let's dive into the code. The very first thing we are going to do is upgrade the CLI version. If I just type ngv, my current version is 13, and you can see 13.3.7 is my current version. I would like to upgrade it. The first command I'm going to write is sudo npm sudo because I'm on Mac. If you're on Linux, definitely sudo would require if you're using a global upgrade. If you're on Windows, just simple npm would do the trick. And I'm going to install my Angular CLI to global for all of the users on my current Mac machine. And I'm going to upgrade it to the latest version, that is the next version of Angular CLI. And the moment it get upgrade, we will see the Angular 14 upgrade on my machine. Let's give it a second. And now if I type ngv, the first one is saying anonymous usage data usage project Angular team. Yeah. And now I can see my CLI version has been upgraded to Angular 14 so that I can start using some of the fabulous features which has been declared for Angular 14. Let's start creating a brand new project using Angular CLI 14 by simply by creating a folder first. So I'm going to create a folder here, Angular 14 demo 1. ng14 demo 1. That would be more appropriate name for this project. And I'm going to select routing as the default feature of this newly created project with CSS, of course. This will take few seconds to configure your npm package library. And once the project is created, we can go inside and simply open this entire workspace into Visual Studio Code. Visual Studio Code is the IDE by default. Developers and the community is using for some time, but it's all about your choice. You can use different IDEs. This is just a code editor or IDE, you may call it. I am personally using Visual Studio Code for Node.js, Angular, and many other development platforms. So let's dive into the basic code structure of newly created project. So the first thing you would notice in package.json, all of the libraries which have been created are coming from 14th semantic version, 14.0.0. Whether it is animation, common, or even the most important library core is again coming from the 14th version of Angular. And if you have an existing project, you can always upgrade your packages by changing the semantic version, either by manually in package.json, by simply upgrading your npm package. Right now, because I have created this project using Angular 14 CLI, all of the packages are correctly configured to the 14th version. Now let me first run this program and see whether everything goes good. And the moment I type in gserve, it will start compiling the project. And now my default project is up and ready with app.component. Now in source folder, if we go, we'll find our usual app folder, we'll find our usual app component, app.module.ts, most important file, app routing module.ts, which is again the routing module registered for the root, and our entry file main.ts. Now in main.ts, we have all the standard set of Angular. There's nothing new so far compared to Angular 14 feature. Now let's convert this very first component, app component, which is our default component, to the standalone component. Now, when I say to convert this into standalone component, that means I'm trying to get rid of app.module.ts. And before get rid of app.module.ts, we need to understand that in app.module.ts, we have certain declaration of a component, imports of modules, including app routing modules. Since we don't have any pipe or any provider registered, any services, the provider is empty array. Or right now, I'm not intending to create any service or any pipe. So this provider will be empty. And then most important is a bootstrap component, which starts bootstrapping this component with this project. Now, in order to get rid of this file, first thing in app.component.ts, we need to add one small attribute known as standalone, and we need to mark it as true. This single attribute, this single setting of standalone true will convert this particular component as a standalone. And if I save, the moment I save, it will generate a compilation error. Let's understand what this error is. It says app component is standalone and cannot be declared in ng module. That means the moment you start creating standalone component, those components cannot be part of any module registration. That's the reason I'm going to remove this app component registration under declaration area of app.module.ts. This way, the first dependency has been removed. But still, I have this error. The error says that app component class is a standalone component. And because it is a standalone component, the way this entire project is being bootstrapped is not in a correct way. In order to find out where it is bootstrapped, because now app.module.ts will likely be gone before delete, let me go back to my main.ts. And in my main.ts, this bootstrapping belong to the app module file or app module class. And that's not exactly which we need. In order to convert this project for standalone bootstrap, there is an inbuilt uh, mechanism has been provided in Angular 14. This inbuilt mechanism basically allows us to bootstrap the application from this app component itself rather using any module. To do that, simply saying bootstrap application, and the moment I hit bootstrap application, it is imported from platform browser library. And in the bracket, I can provide my primary component. As of now, it is app component. That's it. So that I don't need to bootstrap my project through app module. So I need to remove this completely. Now you can keep the production check, but right now I want to keep it very simple. So I'm going to also remove this check of enabling production mode. That also make me put this library unwanted of environment, app module, platform browser dynamic, as well as enable prod. So far, my main.ts becomes very simple, very basic. I just need bootstrap application and my app.component. And the moment I do that, the first important step will be covered. It still returns the error because now the registration of app.module.ts, which carried the app routing module, is missing. So app.module.ts is likely useless right now. And because it is useless, there is no linking in app.component.html for router outlet. So for some time, let me hit Control A and delete everything and simply put a div, welcome to the Angular 40 demonstration. And when I save it, now my compilation happening successful. Remember, by removing everything as well as router outlet, I have also removed the routing reference as of now. Let's go back to our browser and see it says welcome to Angular 14 demonstration. And this way, my app.component becomes standalone component without any relation to app.module.ts. Now it's a wise decision even if we remove this module.ts file. So the most important action of Angular developer's life that deleting this app.module.ts from your project. Now I'm going to delete this, move it to trash, and if I hit Control C and rerun my ng-serve because I made a major modification in the way modules are being registered, let's see if it fail any kind of a compilation. So the compilation happens successful, and if I reload my page, my component is working. Now let's stop this serve and generate few more components. The usual way of a generation of a component, either you can create these folders and files manually, or you can say ng generate component, or simply saying nggc and the name of the component. I'm going to create a hierarchy, for example, components slash about. And that's the first type of a component I'm going to create. But since now I want to create a standalone component, I can pass one more additional parameter, standalone, and I can also use flat if I want to create only one TS file. But let's not use flat, let's create a proper folder for this component, and this will create one new component under my app folder. Now let me create one more component here, like about, there will be contact, and another component home. So I'm creating three standalone components. Meanwhile, this third component is being created. Let's visit this component folder and let's explore this about component, the one which we have created, marking as a standalone component. So if I go back straight to the TS file, you will realize that this standalone flag is there. And most important, this component allows me to import the dependent modules. And this is the new way of integrating the providers, the imports, the declaration right within the component without any need of a module registration. So all of your registration, all of your existing project can be easily converted into standalone module, standalone component. So now, once I created this component, let me have this about work, uh, about contact works, and home works. So let's have these three component. And in my app.component.html, let me create here three components, app-about, app-contact, and app-home. So these are the three components I'm creating here. Of course, those components are not a known element. The reason behind that, we need to register those components. We need to import those components into my main component, that is app.component.ts. And to do that, it's very simple. Right after standalone component, I'm going to import those three components. And the first one is about component, contact component, home component. And because I used IntelliSense, the moment I started typing about component, it is auto importing those components. In your case, if you realize that the auto suggest did not import the respective component, please import it manually and then import and register that component right here. By doing this, now if I run my application, let's see if it throws any error or showcase those three components in the main component file. Its compilation has completed. And now if I reload, I can see about works, contact works, and home works. This way, I have created three standalone components without need of any module registration. I have simply registered and imported those three components into my primary component and then created those three components under my app.component.html. This with the basic version of standalone component has been created. But this is good for demonstration, but in production, the obviously next question arises how to tightly integrate these components with routing. And the most important question, whether lazy routing is possible, how to do the lazy loading of this component. So let's convert this project, continue, and integrate the routing module. But again, routing module comes with a module definition. If I open app.routing.module, it comes with a definition of ng module. So let's first fulfill our routes. So let me create few routes which we are going to use to resolve the routes. The first one is about, and here I can say component, about component. So that's the first path I'm going to create. Similarly, I'm going to create two more paths. I'm just duplicating this path for contact and for home. And I'm going to change the component respectively. Contact component and home component. I'm not configuring any default route here, but of course you can configure a default route. Let's keep it very simple. And now this route will be injected for route here. It's a standard routing technique. But the problem here is, let me add one more topic here in app component. Now instead of hard coding this three component, we need to add a router outlet. And I'm going to comment these three components which I have hard coded. But the moment I add router outlet, it started returning error because router outlet at this moment is unknown. Why? Because in app component, the definition earlier came through the app.module.ts, which is being deleted now. And the definition of router outlet is now situated with app-routing.module. And that is coming from your router module. And this module, which is exported from here, is not being imported anywhere. That's why first thing first, we need to import this module into our primary component. So let me go back to my app component.ts where remember I imported my component. Similarly, I can go ahead and import my module and register it for the root. Okay, so now let's register this particular uh, app routing module right in the import section where we imported these three components. But now I no longer require to import these three component because I am not hard coding these three component into my app.component.html file. So I'm going to remove this hard coded import and instead I'm going to import app routing module and then I'm registering this module with my app.component.ts. At the moment I import this module, because it has a definition of router outlet, the compilation is successful. And now I can go ahead and reload for home. And you'll realize despite I provide home, there is no error here. If I type about, no error here, but that respective component is not being listed here, and there is a problem. Before we do that, let me create three appropriate buttons in app.component.ts. So I'm going to create three links for home, about, and contact. And then I'm going to provide router link to home, about, to contact. So this is basic three hyperlinks. And after that, if I give a break, I'm expecting a router outlet to be listed here. So let me provide a pipe separation. And now home works, about works, and contact works. So these three components are being rendered here correctly in my router outlet. So this version works flawlessly, but there is one small issue with this approach. If I reload my page when I'm on home or when I'm on contact, if I reload my page, the provider is not being injected, and hence, despite I'm calling the correct route, the component is not being created into the router outlet. And there's a reason behind that. The reason behind that is in my app.component.ts, when I inject here, when I import app routing module, this is not being injected on the page load event or the application bootstrap event, because this needs to be injected on an application level where in my main.ts I have bootstrapped my application. And that can be done very easily. Let me go back to app routing module and let me copy this, or let me move this route, the definition of this route. So I'm going to cut the definition of this route. Obviously, it will throw the error here, but we will handle it in a minute. Let me go back to my main.ts and paste that constant here. Of course, I need to import the route. So I'm going to import Angular router library over here, and my all of these three component. So all missing component. Now I have this definition. And just like how we have bootstrap the component, we can provide a provider which can inject all of the routes at a time of a bootstrapping the app component. And to do that, I can create a definition right after this. And this definition will have the definition of providers. The provider in the future is going to be multiple type of a provider like pipe and services. But right now, we are going to provide this route. And again, this is the provider is going to be an array. And because we are importing this provider or the definition of provider from some different entity, we can import providers from definition. And that can be gone from router module for root or for child. Right now I'm going to register it for root, and for root I'm going to register the definition of my routes. And the moment I register this, I no longer need to register or inject this provider of route under my app.component.ts. So I'm going to remove this app routing module registration. And thus, I also no longer require app routing.module.ts file. So I'm going to delete this file as well. Now, in my app.component.ts, it will throw error because my router outlet is not being resolved. And because my router outlet is not being resolved in my app.component.ts, I have to import the necessary appropriate libraries of router outlet. So let me import router outlet. from router modules, and that I'm going to import. We don't need these three components to be imported. And once I import router module in app.component.ts, I can easily use a router outlet. And because now my routes has been bootstrapped in main.ts, I can go ahead and reload my page or even directly jump to home. That provider is being bootstrapped and has been available right on the load event. So this is the correct way of injecting your routes on a global level when your primary component is being bootstrapped. But the routing creation does not stop here. The one primary question most of the developers are asking, including myself, what about lazy loading? How do I handle that? And to handle the lazy loading, a new keyword has been provided to this component integration. So let me comment out the way we are injecting component here, and let's add load component and load children function. So let me add a load component because I'm going to load the above component in a lazy loaded fashion, and using arrow function I'm going to import the necessary component right from the TS file. So it is on app folder, component, about, and about component.ts. And then, of course, I can handle its promise and then can import the about component. And this about component will be now loaded in a lazy loaded way. So I'm going to duplicate this particular line for all rest of the components. This is for contact component, and this is going for home component. This way, now all of these three components are lazy loaded. Let's check and verify how it happens. So let me go to network. Let me run my application without any route, and here I can see my main.js is hardly 5.19 KB. And now if I go to home, the home component will be lazy load. If I go to about, the about component will be lazy loaded, which is hardly of 1.932 KB or 1.90 KB. And then contact component will also be loaded in a lazy loaded way. Now I can go back to home and you will realize that those components are already downloaded or cached. They are no longer being downloaded. So definitely this is a fantastic way to integrate these standalone components with routing using lazy loading technique. Let's move to our next topic about how to create and inject the provider right within the routes. That's a new way of injecting the providers within the route, restricting to that specific route. And then we are also going to see how to register the providers on a global level, exactly the way we have imported and registered the router modules as a provider. So let's go and let's create one simple provider. So let me create a folder here. Let's say services, and under services, I'm going to create logger.service.ts, a very standard logger application. We rename it to all small. And now I'm going to export this logger class. But before that, I need to make it injectable. And to do that, it will import the injectable library from Angular code. In this logger, let me create a constructor here. And let's write down logger initialized. Let me create a simple function log, which will accept a parameter of message as string, which will in return simply write a console.log with some concatenation of logger and then the message with simple implementation of a logger. But I'm making sure that whenever the instance of this logger will be created, the constructor will notify us that an initializer has been created. Let me close all of the files and go back to my about component. And in about component, I'm going to inject the logger in a constructor. Of course, underscore logger as logger. At the moment I use IntelliSense, this library is being imported. If it does not work for you, you can first import the logger service with an appropriate path and then dependency inject, add a dependency injection of the logger class here. And on the constructor, let me utilize this underscore logger instance and create a log of about component is created. A very simple log I'm printing. Now if I run without registering because there is no module.ts involved here, this is about.component. If I go to about, it will of course throw an error because it does not find the logger dependency injection. And to register, there are two ways to do that. The first way, you can inject this dependency injection or you can register this service as a provider right into your route definition. So let me go back to my main.ts, and when my about route has been created, right after that, I can add a providers and I can register my logger service here as a provider. So this is a new way, brand new way in Angular 14, which will allow me to register the provider for specific route. Remember, I have just registered this provider for only about route. So let me go back now. And if I click about, I can see logger initialized and logger about component is created. Now, if I go back to contact, of course, I have not used logger for contact, but if I go back to logger, this time it is using the same instance of a logger. That's why logger initialized is not working. Only the logger about component is created log get fired. Let me inject the same component, the same provider for contact and home as well. So I'm going in a contact and I'm injecting my logger service. Contact component is created. Very simple. Let me do the same thing with home component as well. Created. Now if I save, go back to my application, and if I click home, despite the dependency injection is registered or the logger provider has been registered only for one route. For other route, it is not working. For home, it is not working. For contact, it is not working. But for about, it certainly works. So I need to go back to my main.ts and register this provider to all other two routes. And when I save it, and if I go back, this time if I click home, I can see home component is created, about component is created, and for contact, the same output. But you realize that there are three different instances has been created. That means the dependency injection has been created or the provider has been created in a singleton mode only for that specific route, not for on a global scale. So here, the instance of logger has been created for individual route. That's why there are three logs of logger initialized, one for home, one for about, and one for contact. Now, this may be an advantage, this may be a disadvantage, depending on a context. But what will happen if I want a single instance throughout all the routes? That means what will happen if I want to inject my provider on a global level? That's why I'm going to comment this provider in my routes. And now I'm jumping back to my main.ts. In the Bootstrap application section where I have already injected one provider. And on the same level, I'm going to add one more provider here. Another provider is comma logger. And when we inject this provider at a time of a Bootstrap application, this provider is going to be registered on a global level. That means you no longer need to provide that service into individual route. But see the behavioral difference. If I reload my page and if I click home, I can see logger initialized and the home component is locked. If I go back to about, this time the about component is created, but my logger initialized did not re-initialize. That means there is no another instance has been created. My dependency injection mechanism is using the exact instance which was created at a time of a home route. If I go back to contact, only contact component is created. That means now I am truly using a global singleton object of my service which has been injected as TI. So this is primary difference the way we used to add a dependency injection of a service, whether it is a service, whether it is a pipe, whether it is a factory, anything on a local and a global level. That's a wrap of the first session of Angular 14. I hope you guys are equally excited as I am. Please make sure that you're tuned and subscribe to my YouTube channel so my upcoming schedule, upcoming next recordings will be notified to you the moment I release it. On the top of these video recordings and on my YouTube channel, I am also hosting a couple of webinars which are demonstrating other features not only of Angular but of different stack, including Docker, Kubernetes, AWS, and ASP.NET Core. Please be subscribed and get registered for the newsletter and the notification of the webinars. The link has been given below in the description. Thank you very much. Happy coding.